Good afternoon, everyone. We will start with a prayer. Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, as we gather here today, we humbly bow before your presence. Grant us the wisdom to discern, the humility to accept, and the strength to follow the path you have set before us. We seek your guidance, Lord, as we embark on this meeting. May our light shine upon our discussions, and may our decisions align with your divine will. In your holy name we pray. Amen. Please be seated. Welcome everyone to this council meeting here today. It is great to see so many people in the public gallery. Welcome to councillors and also to media and staff. I will start off with apologies. We all appear to be here. Conflicts of interest. There appear to be none. Confirmation of the minutes of Tuesday, 26th of March 2024. Page 1. Any questions or concerns with these minutes? Could I please have a mover that these are true and correct record? Councillor Phillips, seconded by Councillor Stringer. If there is no comment, I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. And against, the motion is carried. On to, is there any urgent late business? Councillor Reid?
For at the end of the meeting, please.
What's the item, sorry?
Regarding bulletins coming to the agenda.
Okay. More of a discussion than a specific agenda item?
I'd actually like it in the minutes, please.
For the purposes of recommending it, I think that's fine. We'll have it recorded in the minutes. Don't think it needs to be an official agenda item. Thank you, Councillor. Any further? I will move on to the main event of the afternoon, which is the draft annual plan summary on page 21. Would the Interim Chief Executive like to speak to this item at all?
Thank you, Worship. Look, it's reasonably self-explanatory. I can say this is the most challenging budget that we have faced in my long time at the Council. The problems we're grappling with are being felt across the country. So these rate increases proposed are abnormal and a reflection on, I think, a deeper lying problem, which is the sustainability of funding of local government. But we've endeavoured to set out to the Council, but obviously to the wider public, about some of the cost pressures that we're facing and its contribution to the rate increase. And this has been a very taxing process whereby we started at a very high number and we've gradually tried to whittle it down. We have made some suggestions for reductions on section 6, if you like, of my report, and I think it would be useful for the Council to actually go through those items and tick them off. And there may be others, of course, that we have missed. And I guess the key thing, Your Worship, to telegraph to the public at large that this is a draft and is available for consultation, and feedback given will be no doubt seriously considered. But the challenges facing the Council are considerable, and the effect of particularly depreciation is one where it's a concept that's sometimes hard for people to understand, but unlike any other sector in New Zealand, local government must fund depreciation, and that's where we're starting to find it's with our assets being revalued on a regular basis. They keep going upwards. They go upwards because construction prices are moving, particularly post-COVID, and that's where we've got to at this point in time. But I appreciate it's really the elected members' day, and I think staff stand ready to answer any questions that there may be.
Thank you for that, Steve. I've just jotted down some notes that I'd like to start with first, and then I'll open the floor to councillors. I've actually really struggled to write this over the course of the day. There's a lot of information that we've had as councillors, and as you'll all appreciate, this has been a long process to get from I think it was the 40% down to the 31 that the staff got us to, and now down to the 21.4. And I think if someone had told us when we stood for this role that we wouldn't be striking a single-digit rate rise this term, I think we would have all considered our position a lot more. It's incredibly tough, and I know we've been through a lot of tough things at this council, especially this triennium, but I think the toughest thing is definitely passing on a rate increase that we all know as ratepayers that the community simply can't afford. And that's really hard because we have to keep this council going, we have to keep the water flowing through the pipes, and have to keep the roads maintained and all the other wonderful services that the council provides. We're unique, as Mr Parry just specified, with depreciation, but also we are one of the few industries that actually has to front up with when we do our cost increase. Income tax goes up with inflation, fuel tax goes up with fuel, and GST obviously goes up with things like things like food prices. I'm not saying that councils shouldn't be accountable; they absolutely should. But I think there is a real conversation that needs to be had about the future of local government and how we continue to fund this, because we're the second country in the Western world that has the highest disparity between local government spending and central government spending. Almost all of it is spent by central government, with only around 10-15% of the tax revenue coming to local government. So that makes it incredibly tough when we have to pass on these rate increases to our constituencies. We've made a lot of cuts, and I'm sure there's always more that we could cut, and we'll go through them today, but we really want to hear your feedback in the community. We understand that it's incredibly tough out there. Again, we're part of this community as well, so we want to hear what you would like us to change. We're going into our LTP again next year. We're picking up where we left off, so there is some real chance to make some real adjustments in there if that's what the community wants us to do. So I'll leave it there. I know that councillors also want to speak, but I just wanted to express the journey that we've gone as council, and we'll go through these cuts here today and where we've managed to trim the budgets. Would any other councillor like to speak? Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, I have a couple. I've jotted down some figures here, and I'm basically reiterating what we already know. But I'd just like to run through these, and Lorna, if you'd like to correct me if I'm wrong. Bear with me, please. Interest paid, 23-24 financial year, around 2 million. 24 to 25, we're looking at 2.5 million. Debt. 23-24 year borrowings may be up 5 million, which will bring it up to 55 million. 24-25 year projected debt will be up around 6 million, bringing us up to 61 million. This is mind-boggling stuff, and I'm basically agreeing with Your Worship that this isn't working. We can't pass this on to our ratepayers. Do we go to government and say, people are going to be moving out of their houses because of these rates increases? I've jotted some other stuff here. We'll be driving people out of their homes, and it must stop. Government are looking at letting councils increase debt, but that doesn't do anything. We've just got more bills to pay. It doesn't cut the mustard as far as I'm concerned. Prime Minister Luxon and friends need to come up with something better for local government. I don't know what that is, but that's my comments. Thank you. Lorna, am I correct? Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Any other councillors who'd like comments, and then we can do questions at the same time as well. Councillor Reid.
The one thing we can't cut or change is the fact that depreciation is 9.33% of our current rates. So straight away, we've got that to look at. We're actually deferring some of those costs if we can, but bearing that in mind, while we can cut back on our depreciation. We cannot change that next year, and I think we're all really in a no-win situation here because we are legislated to have depreciation. So before we even start looking at any other cuts, 9.33% is going to go for depreciation costs of that 21% that we're talking about.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hovell.
We can't sugarcoat it. It's an appalling increase, and as we've heard, much of it is really non-negotiable and not in our control. There was a fair bit of frustration on social media this morning, and I fully appreciate the sentiments that were there. Earlier this week, I checked what my rates are doing in Environment Southland and see my rates are going up 65%, from $600 to over $1,000 just with Environment Southland, and we're adding further costs to the ratepayer at all. I do have some concerns that we're not fully funding depreciation. It just means that for next year we're adding 4% to our rates before we even start. And I'd like to see it added now, but it would be unreasonable to add further to the figures that have already been talked about. And next year we've got an audit from government, and so our hands are going to be tied totally as well in terms of what we can and can't do. One of the themes that was coming through in social media this morning is that we should be standing up to government and fighting back. We are working with Local Government New Zealand. We are working with other councils. We are talking directly to a number of the ministers expressing our views. The current system, the current rating system that we have in place is no longer fit for purpose. And it isn't helped by the fact that governments over the last 20 or 30 years have added more and more to the responsibilities and financial commitments of councils without giving any money. At the same time, they've made it worse by actually cutting down on the subsidies that are available to councils. In the 60s and 70s, councils could get 50% or up to 50% rebates for doing water and sewerage schemes, and that was stopped. And since then, it's been extremely hard by councils to actually fund that type of work. This time, I actually agree with the approach and attitude of the Mayor of Auckland, Wayne Brown, who's saying to government, if you want us to do these things, you fund it. Unfortunately, unlike Auckland, we don't have an airport company or a port company that we can help subsidise our rates. We've got none of that. We're reliant totally on the income that we get through the rating system. So what do ratepayers want us to do? Should we sell off some of our assets, our vacant land, our parks, reserves? In the case of vacant land, I think we're going to have to. Should we reduce services by reducing the hours at the pool, the library and other council facilities? From my point of view, no. Should we reduce expenditure on road repairs? Certainly not. Or maybe mow the playing fields a little less. Or stop planting flowers in the main street of the town, which is really a key factor that tourists comment on a lot and sets us aside from other councils. We can tinker with some of the things that are present in the annual plan. Some of the things like recycling, again, and defer it. But this is really going to make very little difference because it's the fixed costs that we face this time around, depreciation and interest rates, that are key. I hear people say they don't get value for their rates. I disagree. My rates last year were about the same as what I paid for my electricity bill. And what do I get for electricity? I get the power supply to my house. The council provides water, sewerage, lighting, refuge services in urban areas and beyond across the district, roading, animal control, libraries, tourism, promotion, art, museum, public health, emergency management, environmental management, building control, initiatives for new residents coming to the area and for the elderly. I rate what I receive from the council equally, if not more, than my electricity supply, and they cost about the same. We know we need to totally review our current rating approach and get public feedback on a fairer and more equitable approach. Should we be relying more on user pays? Should we be charging more to use our facilities? Should we bring in water meters to pay for what you use? Should we increase the fees at our council fields and other facilities? Should we stop giving grants to community groups, to health groups, to heritage groups? Should we be seeking contributions for all new development that takes place so that it is the developer paying for what happens rather than the ratepayer? We need to look at that. We also need to look at our own operations. Are we getting value for money from our contractors? Are we being charged the same by contractors as they charge their private clients? At times I wonder. Can we work more closely at the wider range of activities that we undertake with other adjoining councils? These are all the important questions that are going to face us in the coming year. It doesn't help us with the annual plan that we've got before us today, but it actually provides the challenge of what we must work on for the rest of this year, so that when it comes to our long-term plan next year, we're not faced with the same type of increase that we're looking at now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hovell. Councillor Dixon?
Thank you, Your Worship. There's not much more that one can say really that isn't in the report, but this is not the result any of us as wanted after weeks of work by staff and councillors to decrease the final figure without cutting services. As Councillor Reid has said, claiming full depreciation on our assets alone would be 9.33% of the rate rise, let alone insurance, interest and inflationary pressures. Council appreciates families, elderly, farmers and businesses are all under financial pressure. Some district ratepayers to Environment Southland rates have increased by 60%, as Councillor Hovell has mentioned. This isn't justifiable. Add this to the district rate makes the cost inordinate and unsustainable. Central government needs to fund the cost increases they incur on ratepayers, which are also taxpayers and the end users who can't pass on their costs. Council is unable to absorb these cost pressures and the inevitable is a disappointing rate rise. And I totally sympathise with the financial pressures in our community. We are ratepayers too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dixon. Councillor McDonald?
I agree with the comments of Councillors Dixon and Hovell. I think this year we're stuck with the 21.4% rate rise. We've looked at it hard. We've taken off 2.4 million in round figures since the staff brought the original 31% to us. But we need to look hard at the business as a whole, and I think we've got to reflect on, like they said, levels of service. We'll look at the asset base we hold. Neil Mayer said the other night when we were talking about buildings here, the council in itself owns 95 buildings in this small town. We've got to look at whether all these assets are worth having. An example of this is we own the airport. In next year's budget, we've got $250,000 for resealing the airport, and we get rather a minimum lease rental off that. We need to look at these assets and say, are they what their council needs for the future, and can we get rid of them down to selling off things, even down to a lot of farmers have paper roads and other bits and pieces on their farms. Can we get a wee bit of cash out of that way and slowly reduce our asset base over the district? And I think there's quite a few million there to be had, and that would reduce our debt levels. And we also got to look hard at our levels of service in the future, because we may get away without too much blood on the carpet with a 21.4 this year, but if we go back for a second round, we'll be in trouble. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gardine?
The birds have come home to roost. We've spent a lot of money in the last 6 years since I've been on council, and a lot of it has been funded by, or partly funded by government. But then the birds come to home to roost because those assets come into our books. We have to depreciate them, and then the loans come in, we pay interest on that. So sometimes we have to say no to some of these new assets. Sometimes the level of service has to stay there to make it affordable and sustainable for families to live in our district. So councillors have to be very careful what they pass on a monthly basis around the table. If it's unbudgeted, look really hard at it. But going further afield, our council's going to struggle because we have too big overheads for the size of the population, for the size of population we've got. We have an income of about 25 million. We probably need it to justify our IT, our planners, our accountant, our infrastructure just around the table here, we need something like 50 to 70 million coming through the books to pay for that. And that's what we've got to look at in the future. It might be an amalgamation, it might need shared services, but we need to change. It needs to be a whole from the bottom up, because otherwise this is just going to continue. Nothing will change. And we had government reform look through the councils and look at the different options, and amalgamation is one of them, but we've got to be very careful that we still have our say at the table if we do that. Amalgamating one council for all of Southland would give us some scale, but is it the right thing? But I think we're going to have to seriously look at it. And there's no options, because basically IT would be the same for one council, or very similar to one council as it would be for four. And there's quite a lot of stuff we've been going through the last few months, and it's pretty hard going to try and wrangle screw a bit more out of the cat, but without killing it. We have to look hard, and we have to look outside the square to be able to survive. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gardine. Councillor McPhail?
Yes, thank you, Worship. Obviously, taking on board with the discussion that's been laid out before us already. One of the key things that we need to think about, and particularly when we read the document here from our interim CEO, is the term unavoidable. And unavoidable means prevented, ignored, or inevitable. And when you use that in a sentence, I think the Oxford Dictionary says that natural and unavoidable consequences of growing old. And when we look at that term with what we've been dealing with in Gore, we've had an infrastructure that's grown old, and we have kicked the can along the road. We've done some very, very good maybe damage control, or we've patched, and we've got to where we are today. We've also managed to secure some very, very good assets, once in a generation assets, that we'll probably look back on. But we've got to the point where they've said nationally, and I know local government has indicated this, that we are at a tipping point. And Gore Council's there. So we need to tread really, really carefully. We've obviously, as Councillor Gardine said, yes, 6 years have gone by, and we've all made our decisions when we sit at the table, for those that have been here for that time. When we get to this point today, we can look around and try and point fingers or say that this could have been done or shouldn't have been done, but we've come through probably the last 3 or 4 years of a very, very interesting and unusual time within the national and global landscape, and we still live in it at the moment. So when we look at the price reduction and we talk about all the things we can do, we can sell the family silver and we can sell land, but we can only sell it once, and we may have to do that. But when we do a price reduction in our rates, we have to cut deeply. And it may be next time, as Councillor McDonald said, that blood's not being spilt at the moment, but next time, to get ourselves in a situation of getting away from such a high rate increase, that we have to cut services. We actually have to look at how far that knife's going to drive in, which is not the ideal situation, but that's where we lie today. So could it be prevented, ignored? Was it inevitable? I think the circumstances that have happened globally and nationally that have added to this position we sit today. I think central government has a responsibility. They have been involved in actively encouraging us or providing funding for us to achieve some of our goals, which have resulted in our large buildings and projects that have been achieved. Could we have ignored that? We could have, but we wouldn't have what we have today. Was it inevitable? Well, yes, it is inevitable that we got the building done. The cost to do it today would be far higher, and then we get caught with our depreciation. So I think when it goes out for consultation and we go through this, I think people have got to look at it globally, look at it optically at a high level, look across it. We only have 6,500 ratepayers. We don't have an airport. We don't have ports. We don't have any other funding streams other than our ratepayers. And make an informed decision on where they want us to see democracy going. If they want the services cut, or they want their rates to come back, and it's going to be a hard call because there will be service that will be dropped. So that's all I have to say, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor McPhail. Councillor Fraser?
Excuse me. Thank you, Your Worship, through you. I did not think when I came here a year ago that I'd be sitting here looking at a 20% plus rate increase. I've looked through everything that is here, and I concur with Councillor Havel. We are now paying for the last 6 years. We've gone through 6 years of interesting government, and I posed the question to Lorna, and hope she has an answer for me, is what increase have we had from central government imposed on us over the last couple of years, if we can put a percentage to rates to that?
Thank you, Councillor Fraser, and through you, Your Worship. That's quite a complicated question and quite involved. There are a lot of initiatives that the government have encouraged us to get involved with. There's a lot in the community space. Community wellbeings are a big area where the council are being expected to pick up more and more. Whilst pilot funding may be given, pilot funding is taken away, and then councils are expected to pick up the difference if they want to continue the services. There's changes in water legislation and drinking water standards. That has been one of the biggest drivers for our council in recent years. Again, very difficult to put numbers on, but our new water treatment plants are a result of those decisions to change the drinking water standards. So, whilst we're looking at public health improvements, whilst we're looking at improving the quality of life for our constituents, we don't want to have Lock North. There's, all these sort of things lead into where we're at today. So, yes, in short, very difficult to put a figure on it, but it has put an impact on our community.
Thank you, Lord A. And I didn't think you could put a number on it, but I think it's for the wider public that these extra standards that have been imposed by central government cost a lot of money. And if I was a man who sat back and thought the previous government were wanting to take three waters into their own coffers, this make it difficult for for local government. I only pose that as an idea, because at the end of the day, some of the extra charges that I'm reading here for us to afford in such a small ratepayer base is impossible. I had another question, and that was around if we got our GST back on our rates. And I think you said something like $4 million, is that correct?
Through you, Your Worship, yes. On the proposed rate increase for next year, the 27 million, we would get $4 million back in GST.
And from that, we could offset some of our depreciation with that money, if we had that. And this is where I think everybody around the table agrees that we have to push back, and we have to say that as a small council, how can we afford to keep running? Because I hate to go to my ratepayers and go, it's another $15 or $16 or $20 a week when they haven't even got it. And next year, we're already sitting on 4% of depreciation that we're proposing not to use this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Just on that one that's always stuck out to me, and correct me if I've got the numbers wrong here, Jason, but fluoridisation of our water, which was a government directive, we have to do that, implement that this year. That's going to cost almost $250,000 to implement that in our district. That's something that we haven't had the feedback from our district that they want, but it is something that the government is making us do. So that's just one of the many examples that there are of things that we have to implement because there's a government direction that we get no extra funding for. And you could argue the benefits of that all day, but it's still something that is imposed on us. Very well said, Councillor Fraser. Any further comments? Otherwise, we can go through the list if there isn't. Oh, Councillor McPhail.
Thank you, through your worship. I'm looking at this from a completely different direction. I'm looking at it from a householder, paying more money for my insurance, my food, my petrol, my power. Everything is going up. And I'm looking at that thinking, The cost structure for the household is horrendous, and the cost structure for the council is horrendous. We've been stuck under that. It's been a perfect storm the last couple of years, and everybody has been affected. The key thing that we are acutely aware of the balance need for investment and with affordable increases, but at 21% or 20% is a humongous increase. We can't get away from it. And believe me, we had very robust discussions, and I apologise to any councillors and staff if I've said the wrong thing to people, because I've looked at it and asked about things and tried to get things cut out, and like the rest of us, that we wanted to get rid of because we thought that was the way we could do it, but we couldn't. So levels of service and things like that have got to remain. So we have done a pretty robust process in trying to get it as low as we can. And look, it's not as low as I would like, but that's where we've ended, unfortunately. So that's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McPhail. Just actually on that, it reminded me of something that isn't in this report but was discussed, was this council potentially leaving LGNZ. That was discussed in workshop, and the decision was made to stay in, primarily because of reasons that Councillor Fraser just pointed out, of that advocation to central government for things like return on GST. They are huge advocates to this sector, and it means that we can get in right behind and really try and have that conversation with central government about returning that tax that is essentially a tax on a tax, which makes no sense to me whatsoever. Is there any further conversation from councillors? Looking at the two that haven't spoken. Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just in much in agreement with every councillor around the table, and look, we're charged with bringing the best governance we can for the finances that were received inside council. And I think we've done due diligence to what we've been facing, and I hate to say that once again, after probably the third time in a row that I've apologised to the ratepayers of our district about what's facing them, but you can be assured that we've done the best that we can possibly do.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Stringer, do you have anything to add? Don't have to.
Oh, since you're forcing me, Your Worship. Look, as a first-term councillor and coming to the elections, I sort of knew that we would be picking up a poison chalice with the way the economic climate was going at the time, and could foresee what was coming through my personal business at the time and everyone else's businesses that I was talking with. They were having those challenges. It has been a delay that has come through to the council system. It's obviously a little bit longer, but it has hit us, and we have the inevitable. We've got to take those costs on board. I posed a question to Lorne, what happens when we hit our monetary cap? We can't borrow anymore. What does the council do? Do they declare bankruptcy? What happens then? Like, how does society function at the end of the day? I see here that democracy is working fine, but the systems we have in play or in place behind it just are not in tune enough to the communities and to how they operate. I seriously think we need to look at how we run things and how it's run both locally and from a central government point of view. Their influence on us is great. It's like a big hand reaching over us, and they pull the strings, and we have to work to that puppet master.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you all councillors for saying something here today. I really appreciate the feedback, and I'm sure your community does as well. Just before we go through that list, I just wanted to touch on, there were a couple of mentions around advocacy to central government, as Councillor Hovell says, and we've had plenty of conversations about structures and how we might be able to rethink this whole local government thing. I do have a meeting with the Minister next week where I will be putting it to him, this conversation that's been happening today, and also just the financial pressure that local government is. I'm sure he's acutely aware of it, but there will be a face-to-face interaction from us of trying to figure something out that's a little bit more optimistic for the future, because the way it's running at the moment isn't working. Let's go through list by list. So page 24, we'll start with the first bullet point, which is not fully funding the total increase of depreciation. I believe the number was 30%, but some of them are 20%, and drinking water is fully funded because we simply can't underfund depreciation in drinking water to be able to hit our drinking water regulations. Is there any debate about that individual topic? I know that Councillor O'Val was talking about fully funding, so we don't have to pick it up next year, but to clarify, we talked about that in a workshop as well, but it was brought up by several members that the community simply can't afford it this year, and we have to hope that the economic situation looks a little bit better next year than it does now. Councillor Reid.
Yeah, further to that, Mr Mayor, the one thing that possibly a bit of light at the end of the tunnel, inflation should be tracking slightly downwards, and also interest rates, which would also make a big difference to us when it comes to debt repayal. So, you know, we're hopeful, but whether that happens or not, we just have to wait and see.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. And yes, that was a discussion in those workshops about whether, yes, we fully fund it this year or watch what the market does next year. No further discussion on that one. On to the next one, which is the non-employment / deferral of new positions in the organisation. I think that's fair with the current economic situation. Deferring some property renewals. Any conversation there? No conversation there. Deferring some IT upgrades and projects. No conversation there. Delaying the rollout of curbside recycling service until 1 April 2025. No discussion. No. Councillor Val.
I'll rise to your bait. A number of us during the election were really stressing the need to have an effective recycling scheme in Gore, and I'm mindful of some of the social media I've been reading over the last week, where people have been expressing frustration that it hasn't been happening. And there are strong environmental reasons as well as the actions that have been taken by WasteNet in this area. We do need to proceed with it. I believe that the environmental benefits outweigh the 0.33, I think it is, % that we would save in rates by not doing it. So the amount is so small that at the end of the day, the benefits we get from it are greater than, I believe, the cost.
Thank you, Councillor O'Val. Any further comment? Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Worship. Look, I'm of the mind that it would be really great to see some of the good things that are happening around town being promoted by comms people. There are a lot of recycling, there is already a lot of recycling happening in Gore, and it would be really nice to highlight that. I think Gore Main School are one of the schools that are doing a lot of work in that area. It would be really good to see the council supporting that in the interim.
Thank you, Councillor. There might be one also to pass on to WasteNet as well, as promoting things all throughout the region. Councillor Stringer.
Through you, Worship, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the government are adding a tax to the tonnage of waste collected every year, and that goes up again next year, doesn't it? So if we implement it earlier, we're keeping that cost down that's going to landfill. Yeah, moot point, and it's just throwing it out there, but just letting people know that there are costs in behind it that are driving that cost up.
It's going from $50 to $60 a tonne? Yeah. Yep, so it will be increasing. So is there an appetite to move it to January? Who knows? Councillor Richard McPhail.
Just through your worship, just to add to that, I actually spoke to one of the oldest, the older recycling gentlemen in town here just prior to the meeting. and it was more around the collective fact of anything they could do, seeing a delay just to assist with the rate increase. There wasn't a great concern about delaying that curbside recycling, but I think I like what Councillor Stringer's saying, that it is inherent on the public. If we have existing recycling here, and if we can get everyone to get their heads around it and get their product into the existing recyclers, if it doesn't go over the tip face, every tonne we don't put over there, it saves us some money, because every truck that we pack up, 22,000, I think it's 22,000 kilos, heads over to the bend. And if you can save your cardboard, I think they put through the Pakihi Lions put through 650 kilos, 50 tonnes, and if you work that out of cardboard, that didn't go over our tip face, and there's a great savings there. So if we go through with this, it's a reminder to the community, if everyone's watching it today, around their rates increase, support what we got there, and it's actually just another little drop in the bucket to save some costs.
Very good point, Councillor. And the best part about all of that is that that cardboard that you take is then sold, and those profits then go back into the community as well. So it really is a great service that those gentlemen provide. Any further comment on the recycling? We're happy to keep it at 1st April. There's no one who's going to join me on wanting to make it January? Nope. Okay, that is cool. Downsizing the community strategy department. Is there any comment there? Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Worship. What I'm wondering is what that actually means. In dollar terms, I can see it's 271k, but what are we losing through that?
In effect, I guess we're reducing the head count in that area, so we're reducing, there won't be a dedicated community strategy manager, there won't be a dedicated Ready for Living coordinator, but there will be one person that will still remain and doing a bit of Ready for Living, but also welcoming communities. And so really it's retreating back to if you like, a community development officer that we had a few years ago, and reflects the need to actually trim our cloth to suit our circumstances in a nutshell. So we won't be doing as much as we have, but we will not be abandoning the whole concept altogether.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Steve. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor, just to you, Mr CE, what happens if funding does become available for the Ready for Living coordinator and there's no budget for her to work with?
Through your worship, if funding does become available, obviously then we will react to that and see what type of program for Ready for Living we can use. But in the absence of any guarantee of funding, and the funding currently runs out at the end of June, and given what we're facing with our budget, we felt it was responsible to actually just draw a line in the sand and say we'll have one dedicated officer who will do some things with Ready for Living, but we won't have that dedicated resource. But if the funding comes available, then we would have to also consider what type of financial support be required for that position. Not ideal, and often this is one of the troubles you have with external funding. Quite often you don't know until well into June as to whether you've got funding for the next 12 months. But on balance, in terms of trying to telegraph our intention and seek the savings, we thought it was best to say, well, the council's, if there's no funding coming in, we believe the council wouldn't want to fund it itself because of this projected rate increase. So that's really, in a nutshell, we will react to what funding becomes available and see whether we can salvage part of the program with that funding.
Thank you, and I'm very aware of the fact that one of our community wellbeing is one of our 4 values. So yeah, it would be good to just keep that one on the back burner, if at all possible, please.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ovell.
and for the Chief Executive, what are the implications for the Youth Council?
The Youth Council at this point in time is proposed to lapse due to, again, a lack of dedicated funding for a support person. That's something that the community may want to salvage. It's fair to say that currently we are in month 4 of a year and we haven't got a youth council up and running. So at best it's probably going to be at least a year's recess, but at the moment the youth council as we know it, without funding support, is likely to lapse.
Councillor McPhail.
Yes, just through your worship. Both the Community Strategy Department and obviously the next item down there goes hand in hand with what I'm going to say here. I think, and people will know when we work through this in the workshop, that I had a discussion around the social input and impact that a council can have. And we have downsized that. We have moved away from that social arm, and I accept that. But I don't want to see it completely, because I think that it is both that and some of our parks and gardens is our point of difference as a community. And I think we shelve it. We're in difficult times and we need to trim our cloth, but I think we shelve some of those projects that were there, and they can return if we ever get back to that time when we think that we can do it. But I think the community strategy, what was achieved over those years with some of those staff, and they've actually moved on, was an incredible achievement. They sourced funding, they provided a service. A lot of people never saw it unless they saw the articles in the paper. So probably ending that discussion is the social side of the council is going to be going back to footpaths and power poles and water. We will be looking at the basics. If that's what people want, that's the services we need to drop back to get ourselves back from this tipping point.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Your Worship. I could see that there could be other organisations that could take over, like Ready for Living, and youth, even maybe Youth Council could be run by schools. I think because we're an ageing population, Ready for Living has really stood in a good place for those elderly people, and they have enjoyed it. And like Councillor Reid, I'd hate to see that lost as well, but just wondering if other organisations could pick it up and get an external funding for that.
Yeah, so probably just to add some clarity around that, there are still conversations going on around that contract and whether an external organisation will pick that up. And as Mr Parry said, if that is to come to fruition, we'll just have to do some rejigging in terms of the operational budget there, but definitely can fit it back in if that funding becomes available. The other thing was around MTFJ as well, so that contract still sits, it'll sit with Great South, but we'll have a team member up here 3 days a week as well, so that program will still be running. And then also we have a staff member who will be doing the welcoming communities and Ready for Living stuff. So we won't completely lose that arm, but it will be significantly reduced. But coming back to Councillor McPhail's point, we're making some adjustments to see where we can trim back, but it may not work. It may be really obvious where we've cut back, and you may, as a community, say, we just really want this service back, and that's absolutely fine. We can put it back in and we can look elsewhere, and that definitely rolls into the next point around the gardens too, the trimming parks and reserves expenditure. It is one of the highlights of our district, but we're going to try and pull back and we'll see how it affects. But if it is a real issue with the community, let us know, because that's great feedback for our LTP. Have we all finished on the community strategy? Do we want to move into parks and reserves? Councillor Reid.
Thank you. I'd just like to be, about the Youth Council, I would really like to see that, okay, we're going to have a lapse, but that somebody actually is assigned or asked to pick up and review where the Youth Council goes next, how that's achieved, and then maybe we could look at external funding or something like that for the youth of the district as well, because while we look after the elderly, we need to be looking after the young ones as well. And if there's an interest from the young people to pick up a new council and run with it, great. If not, that's out of our hands.
So that report is sitting there, Councillor. So I don't know if we have actually explored external funding for the youth council or youth of that nature. So it's something we could potentially do. In my work with Mayor's Task Force for Jobs, my intention, and it's still early phase, to work a bit closer with those young people. So I'm hoping we can get some youth voice from that angle. But that's a bit of a work in progress. But absolutely, it won't be completely dropped. That's for sure. Moving on to Parks and Reserves, trimming that budget. Do we have any concerns there, conversation? Again, we'll see how that goes throughout this year, and we can always adjust it next budget if it is a significant change in service. Deferring upgrading the council's customer service request system. No discussion there. Deferring multi-sports complex capital projects, and deferring the community awards. Oh, sorry, Andy, apologies.
Sorry, through you, Worship. The only thing I have trouble with the multi-sport complex is if you're putting off some needed repairs and maintenance, it's just going to be extra costing.
Yeah, through your Worship, just for the benefit of particularly the public present, each manager was asked in their capital works and operational expenditure to rate the projects they had in their activity management plan, from what you could let go to mission critical. And so the projects that were let go in the multi-sports complex were lower priorities. And so the key essentials, and Martin McKeith did a great job. I think it was 3 of them there. He said, I've got to have that, and the others we just tipped out. So, and of course the multi-sports complex in recent years has been the subject of a considerable deferred maintenance upgrade, to the likes of the new re-roof, the upgrade to the ventilation plant room, and also completely sort of regrouting the pool bottom. So it's had a lot of work in the last 12, 18 months, so it stands itself in good stead for the next few years.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you, Steve. And last up is discontinuing the community awards. Any conversation there? No, that is the entire list. So circling back to the rate increase, there's no adjustments in that list as outlined. Is there any further conversation before I look for a mover and a seconder? Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Just like to acknowledge the work and the effort that the managers have put in, referring back to Mr Parry's comment about how they all volunteered what they could and couldn't lose or work with. It's been much appreciated by the councillors. It's saved us having to ask them to slash their budgets, and they've come forward and really helped us, to be fair, by voluntarily adding all those things into these budgets.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comment around the table? I know that people are really keen to talk to us about these issues and talk to the community in general. We will be out and about during this consultation period. I believe it is the week of May 6th will be the most that we're out and about. We're trying to go to all of the different townships. So we'll be in Gore, Matoda, Pukaro, Waikaka, and I think we're doing the Matoda and the Waimumu one combined. So please come out and see us. Let us know how you feel about this. If you have any solutions or where you would like us to make cuts, let us know. I can't promise anything, but it's definitely stuff that we can take into our LTP next year if there are massive, large service level changes that you would like to see in the district. If there is no further discussion, I will look for a mover. Councillor Phillips, thank you very much. Seconded by Councillor McPhail. I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? The motion is carried. Thank you very much, councillors. Item 6. Item 6? Item 6. The Gore District Council Subdivision and Land Development Plan Bylaw 2019, page 51. Aaron, would you like to speak to this at all?
Thank you, Your Worship. This report's just trying to tidy up what we're currently doing anyway. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions, councillors? Councillor Val?
I'm just wondering, our subdivision land development bylaw is based on the New Zealand standard, and then with a few things that have been added for our situation. Can I suggest that the addition that you're looking at here actually be reported back to New Zealand standards, saying from a practical point of view this works better in our situation, and for them to give some thought to moving forward as well?
Through you, Mr Mayor. That standard has been taken and modified a wee bit from a couple of the other local councils, but yes, I can take that back.
Councillor Stringer?
Through His Worship, using the standard with the other councils, how long has it been in place for? I realise that technology changes and things change 10, 15, 20 years down the track. Having it in place now, is there going to be a review period, say in 5 or 10 years, to make sure it's still applicable, it's still fit for purpose?
Through you, Your Worship. So any plan that's put in the bylaw gets reviewed every time the bylaw's reviewed. As for other councils, some have been using it for 5 years. We've got an increasing demand for pumped wastewater connections, so now's the time for us to need to activate one.
Thank you, councillor. Any further questions? Councillor Phillips?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just, Aaron, what about the recovery costs to our main lines? Is there going to be a recovery cost from these people, or are we just relying on the rates?
Through you, Your Worship. The boundary kit is the property owners, and the council takes over from point 6 in the diagram, and from there we maintain as part of the rates, but anything that fails is the homeowner's responsibility, and we will stock some parts there because we have some ourselves, so that if something fails we can repair it in an emergency and then invoice the property owner for it.
Sorry, Your Worship. No, I probably wasn't clear enough, Aaron. I mean, as in a water meter situation, not so much the cost of the putting it together in the parts, etc. I mean, the recovery cost of the flow of the sewage water going back into our pipelines. Is it going to just be standard through the rates, or are we going to put water meters on them?
Through you, Your Worship. It's just a standard fee recovery for the same as any other property for their wastewater connection.
Councillor Stringer?
Through you, Your Worship. Since we're going to be locking into a standard, is there going to be a fixed rate on the gear so there can be no price gouging, knowing that it's going to be a captive market all of a sudden? And how will the cost be known to the public so they know that you may be challenged in 5 years by the public going, well, I can buy or put this in and it does XYZ features more than what your current product does that does one.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Your Worship. This is just a guideline, so this is minimum standard, so we don't say what specs there are. It is up to the property owner and the developer to come to us and show us. This is just a drawing for them to know what we require, and they can then go out and source those parts themselves.
Thank you, councillors. Any further discussion? Could I please have a mover? Find the recommendation, 1 second. That the report be received and the council approve the minor amendment to section 5.3.12. Councillor Stringer, seconded by Councillor Fraser. Any further discussion? I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. And against? The motion is carried. Item 7, page 55, financial report for 29 February 2024. Lorne, would you like to talk to this one?
Thank you, Your Worship. At the risk of sounding like a broken record, we're not expecting much change from previous months and commentary from previous months. The main variance that we are seeing is in relation to depreciation and also interest costs. So the movement from where we were on budget, what we budgeted to be, to where we are now is 1.2 million. Of that, 1 million of it is depreciation movement and 263,000 is interest costs. Elected members will be familiar with the report. I'm happy to take questions and answer questions as they arise.
Thank you, Lorne. Councillors, any questions on the financial report? Councillor Stringer.
Through you, Your Worship. Why is civil defence over budget?
Through you, Your Worship. Traditionally, Council has only funded in the budget the costs for Emergency Management Southland. One of the proposals this year in the annual plan, as you'll be aware, is that we had proposed to put additional costs in to cover expenses that we incurred during an emergency event. These particular costs were related to the September 2023 emergency event, where we had to fund sandbagging and items during that event. So currently we don't include that in there, and it's only the Emergency Management Southland. You'll see us come back at long-term plan to request that we start putting some funds aside to cover these costs during an emergency event.
Thank you, Lorne, and thank you, Councillor. Any further question? Councillor McDonald.
Just, Lorne, inventories are up on plan for 805k versus 226k. Is there something major we're holding in inventory?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, through Your Worship. These are the sections for Matai Ridge. So once they become available for sale, they change from an asset to inventory, which is still an asset, but they're available for sale. So it's our sections at Matai Ridge.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Lorne. Any further questions? Councillor Stringer.
Through you, Your Worship. I see parks and reserves are still heavily above budget for this time of year. It seems to be reoccurring. Why are we getting this?
Through you, Your Worship, we are working with the Parks and Reserves Manager, and the deficit has come back a little bit compared to last month. With the budgeting, some of it is timing with phasing. So when we budget, we phase at 12 months, but actual costs occur seasonally. So going forward, we're going to be working with the budgeting cycle over a couple of years to start bringing that in properly, so you compare apples with apples.
Thank you.
Any further questions? May I please have a move that this report be received? Councillor Reid, seconded by Councillor McDonald. I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. And against? The motion is carried. Item 8, page 66, proposed regional climate change strategy. This is more just a formality, as I believe the council recommended Councillor Hovell as the representative a few meetings ago. But was there any conversation to be had on this item? I will look for a mover. Councillor Phillips, seconded by Councillor Dixon. I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? The motion is carried. Item 9, page 94, Local Government New Zealand Conference. This, I would be interested to see whether the council is of the mind to table this report just until we get a program. I don't believe the program's out yet. No, I haven't seen it. So we've still got a bit of time. It isn't till August, so we have a few council meetings before then. That's so, Councillor Hovell?
Yeah, I would be in favour of having this on the table and not dealt with today. Without seeing the agenda, we cannot ascertain whether in fact it is worthwhile sending someone. And at a time when costs to the forefront, I would be reluctant to see us send anyone to the local government conference unless there was good or other reason for them to be in Wellington at the time.
Thank you, Councillor Hovell. Councillor McDonald?
Totally confer with Councillor Hovell's comments.
So we're all in favour to table it?
Christchurch, yes.
Thank you, councillors. This will come to a further meeting. Item 10, page 95, the Cost of Fund Distribution Subcommittee. This was on the agenda of the Matoda Community Board last night, where they selected Laurel as their representative. But I wonder whether Councillor Phillips wants to talk to this subcommittee item any further.
Thank you, Your Worship. Only if there's questions that councillors want to know about. I'll just give you a little bit of background. The cost of fund was set up quite a few years ago, as you've seen in 2019, I think, from a bequest from the family. You've seen the expenditure of the projects that have gone through in the past, and it was supposed to be completely spent, but at the time the remainder of the funds, I think it's grown from 70-something thousand to back up to 115,000 for any projects along for Mataura district, so, or the Mataura ward, I should say. And it's just a formality for me just to make sure that we had a committee set just in case there was a project come forward to it. That was all, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. It was a discussion last night as well at that meeting whether a district-wide councillor was necessary. And I guess I'd open that back up to the district-wide councillors that are around the table. There was a preference from the community board to have a district-wide member. As Councillor Phillips said, it provides a little bit of independence because that district-wide councillor usually isn't situated within Matoda, so can give a non-objective view as almost an independent member. Councillor Hovell.
Thank you. I was present at the meeting and understand the reasons for that person being there in terms of acting really in an independent role. I'd like to nominate Councillor Joe Stringer as being the at-large councillor appointed to that group.
Is that okay with you, Councillor Stringer? You happy to move that? Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor McDonnell? Or would you like to speak to that? Or are you just happy to second? Any further discussion on this? And I'll also include that the nomination from the Matoda Community Board that Laurel be ratified as well. All happy with that? We have a mover and a seconder. I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. And against? Carried. Thank you, councillors. Page 98, item 11, proposed Gore District Plan hearing procedures. Would the interim chief executive and or Councillor Hovell like to speak to this at all?
Through your worship, nothing really to add. It's very procedural, but I think it's important that the council know how the district plan hearing panel will be conducting its business. It's important obviously to submitters, but it's important for you to know that there's a very robust process in place to ensure that the hearings are conducted in a fair and efficient manner, and this is going to be a pretty intense workload for those panel members for the next 12 months or so, but it's really just for your receipt and noting.
Councillor Hovell, would you like to add anything?
No, as the Chief Executive said, it's a procedural matter. I am pleased that, in looking what other councils have done, normally these procedures are about 25 to 30 pages long. And so I took a little bit longer in terms of writing it to cut it down as much as I could to something that was usable and a little bit more user-friendly. I'm happy to answer any questions, though.
Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Worship. I'd just like to thank Councillor Hovell for the work he put into this. It looks to me like a really good plan for the hearings. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Your Worship. No, I'd just like to congratulate Councillor Hovell on the report and believe that transparency is a must and must be front line, and congratulations on doing so. And with that, I'd like to move the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor. A seconder? Councillor Fraser. I just had one question. It might be a bit cheeky, but in Appendix A, it's quite a long time that these hearings will be going for. What was the reasoning behind the spacing them out, out of curiosity? I see there's only one session in October. Well, there's a kind of a session a month. Was that availability, or how did that work out in planning that, Councillor Hovell?
As someone who has been involved in over 20 district plan reviews, I can assure you that a one hearing week per month is really quite a tight workload. Not only are the commissioners required to consider the reports that come from the planning consultants, but also all of the evidence that comes from the experts who are appearing at it, and everything is pre-circulated to try and cut down in terms of what's happening on the day. But even lay people are encouraged to submit the material beforehand. So the commissioners are required to go through and read everything, including all of the submissions prior to each hearing, work out what questions they've got for the day so that they are focused. We will then spend 2, 3, 4 days hearing from all of the submitters. And then it will take us at least another 2, 3 or 4 days to actually go through all of the evidence again and make decisions on everything. So that's roughly two and a bit weeks of the 4 weeks used up. And then the decisions need to be written. And I can assure you that we're going to be dealing with decisions that are probably going to be, in the case of each one of those monthly hearings, up to 40 or 50 pages long, dealing with all the points that have to be dealt with. So allow another week each month for decisions to be written, plus a little bit of off time, and you'll see that there's actually 5 weeks required in every month to actually deal with it and fit in what's happening at council as well. So yes, it's spread out over 14 months. It seems horrendous, but I can assure you that, and really one of the reasons for doing the procedures is to help it run as smoothly as possible front of house. And councillors would have seen me in here with the hearings administrator before, even talking about the way we're going to be setting up the room and providing facilities for everyone. So it is a major task, and it'd be nice to do it sooner, but it isn't practical.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm just doing that maths. It seemed like you had a spare week in there, but that's right. But thank you for that clarification. It's good to hear that it is moving at a quick, well, will be moving at a quick pace. We have a mover and a seconder. Any further comments? I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. And against, the motion is carried. Page 113, item 12, Rural Roads Subcommittee meeting minutes. Would either of the members like to comment on this at all? Or any of the members, actually.
Just to comment
on
number 4, metalling, grading and drainage. I offered a word of caution at this time as a high risk and not up to mining standards. I don't think that was me. It might have been Stuart McNeil.
Thank you, Councillor. I can see Jason jotting something down, so I'm sure that'll be remedied. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. One of the things I see in that report, and actually on number 4, was the collaboration with SDC, if possible, over the gravelling. So that's a good start for a bit of community togetherness. And the other thing, I don't know if Jason's able to answer this, but in the last triennium, we had discussions with Waka Katohi about the roundabout at Charlton Road and State Highway 1, and also the State Highway crossing on Hamilton, over to Hamilton Park. So I was just wondering what movement's been on, if you can answer that, please. We just heard nothing, so...
Through your worship, I'll have to come back and update on those things for you. However, it is, again, important to note that, like many, I guess, departments across the country, Waka Kotahi NZTA is trying to grapple with change of government direction and the new government policy statement as well. So a lot is in the air regarding the program of work, not only for the coming year, but the next 3 years in particular. And so not a lot of certainty at the moment coming out of central government and its agencies, but we'll continue to do that. But I will push back just in terms of some feedback on those couple of areas we've asked about.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Jason. Could you just add to that list the railway crossing at Matota as well? Thank you. Councillor Phillips, sorry did I steal that off you?
No, not at all, Your Worship. It was on the list, but that's fine, as long as someone had mentioned it. No, I just got a question to the roading group. I noticed that there was a bit of concern about the spraying, and I have noted myself just driving around that the spraying hasn't really taken effect at all, and we've got quite a lot of wilding trees increasing on our roads, and I'm a little bit concerned about that, if we could try and get that sorted. And the other thing is that the refuge crossing at Hamilton Park has been completed, so yeah, so it's up and running just about.
Councillor McDonnell, I think beat you to it there, Councillor Fraser.
I've spoken to our roading manager, Murray Hasler, about the spraying, and I know because I've been at a farm where the spraying contract was called in to get water, so he is working, but very slowly. But I'm concerned about his kill rate, because I was down at Wyndham and it's very, very, very low.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just reading on page 116 that the proposed budget for a full ceiling was 1.8 million, and which is a $500,000 greater. So that puts us in the hole for either at the work not getting done or getting it done substandardly. Is that how I read that?
No, it's the budget will have to work to budget. So basically, the length of the ceiling that gets done will get shortened. The standard won't be lowered. Yeah.
Councillor Stringer.
Through you, Your Worship, in relation to Councillor Reid's question earlier, in the Waka Kotahi GPS, which is the plan that goes to government, I do believe the Matera crossing wasn't, the roundabout wasn't in the original GPS that's gone in, but I think there are going to be further things added to it, so it is still in the pipeline there somewhere. Yes, and the spraying has been discussed extensively in the roading committee meetings as well there, Councillor Phillips.
Did you have something there, Jason? You're all right? Covered. Councillor McPhail.
Yes, just through Your Worship, it's probably a timely reminder to our rural residents and people on the country roads. We've actually had a bit of grading and work done out there, but they clearly voiced their concerns through councillors, but they still need to log calls through to council itself, so that we actually are getting them because they're auditable. And just a reminder for the public to do that, so we actually do have the record there. I know the councillors probably end up like stuck records talking to our roading manager, but yeah, it's important that people that are travelling along there are reporting those and continue to do that, so we can actually see where improvements are occurring or deterioration occurs. And the other thing I'd add is sometimes we don't control the weather. The weather is controlled by a bigger person than us, So sometimes we do get ourselves into some difficulty with when grading occurs.
Thank you, councillors. So people can get it through the Antenio app as well. So if you report it and it's done and it's not to standard, then report it again and we'll come out and do it. The other thing is we've also increased the budget in roading as well, and we're still waiting on NZTA to get back to us on improving their end of it because they subsidise our roading budget. But we are confident that it should be okay. But there will be an increase in the next year, so hopefully people will see that out on the roads as well. Any further discussion? Councillor Dixon?
Thank you, Worship. I'm just going back to the vegetation control. I'm wondering where council sits with a broom right on the boundary, because I know on Waimea Street there's an awful lot of broom growing and flowering and seeding onto the other side of the road.
Jason?
Through your worship, we'll investigate that and just check whether it's in the road carriageway or not, and if so, but there's a potentially an obligation for the regional council to there around pest plants, so we'll have a discussion and make sure we're addressing that as well.
Thank you. Councillor McKenzie.
On the subject of spraying and broom, etc., Mersey Street, across the road from where the station is, there's a rather large park there that's used by public. And from the railway line to the curb is owned by New Zealand Rail. And they've let it go to crap, for want of a better term. They put their fence up along there and they've discontinued looking after that land. I've talked to Murray about it and he went and had a look. But the grass used to be about yay high. And you can walk along it. You can now hide an elephant in there, and there's cats living in it. It's massive, and I don't believe it's council's responsibility because it's railway land and it's got broom growing on it. And the broom has now jumped the curb and it's growing in the tar seal of our car park, and it's going to ruin it. So I'd just like to direct that to whoever I direct that to, please.
I can see that Jason's taking.
He's writing stuff down. Just Murray did go and look at it. And he said, yes, it is a problem, but apparently it is railway land, and it shouldn't be council that has to tidy it up, I don't believe.
Yeah, vegetation policy might cover that. I might be speaking out of turn a little bit, but the reaction we usually get around beautification stuff from both NZTA and Kiwi Rail is they don't deal with how things look. So it's definitely a conversation we can have, but...
They used to look after it until they put the fence up.
They certainly did, but they're tightening their budgets as much as everyone else. But it's something we need to canvass. They can't just drop services like that.
Thank you for
that. Damaging property. Any further discussion? Could I have a move that the minutes be received? Councillor Dixon, seconded by Councillor McDonnell. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. And against? Motion is carried. On to page 120, item 13, issuing a staff warrant and authorisation. Again, another procedural item. Did we have any comments? Could I please have a mover? Councillor Gardine, seconded by Councillor Reid. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? Carried. Page 121, summary of the Mayoral Forum meeting. Quite an interesting presentation from DataGrid. They are looking, as the minutes reflect, to build a data centre just outside the Invercargill boundary in the Southland District, as well as lay a fibre cable from Sydney through to Invercargill. So that's a direct connection. Was a really interesting presentation. The Mayoral Forum put forward a letter in support of them joining the fast track list, but there was concerns expressed around power generation in our region. I think that's kind of the conversation always leads back to when we look at big projects in this region, is where are we going to get the power from? We have a little bit extra at the moment, but it only takes one big project and we've got to build more wind farms and things. That was about it for the Mayoral Forum. Anything to add there, Councillor Val? No. Any comments from around the table? Councillor Gardine?
Just noticed it's probably on prime land down there, 100 acres, 43 hectares. It's a huge area on prime land.
Yeah, that's another thing that they're grappling with as well, is the class of that soil. So, but it is the prime location for them, so it'll be interesting to see how they get on if they do get onto the fast track consenting list. Councillor Fraser.
Yeah, with that, I just have the fear that they'll chase the oak company up the country as well, because that is prime land in there, and there will be no. What sort of time frame they're looking at? Did they give any idea on that?
Depends on when the consent gets granted, if it does. But this project's, I know it came to Mayoral Forum about 2 years ago as well, so it's been around the traps for a while. You've got to get the funding for the data cable, that's the main thing. So it won't shoot off further up the country because the connection has to come through Invercargill to make the project work. But you've got to get serious funders and some serious government investment to get that cable laid. So, yeah. But, I mean, we're in support of it. It'll be great for the region if it happens, but ultimately it's private industry, so we'll just see how it goes. Councillor Stringer?
Through your worship, in the grand scheme of things, running a little bit of extra cable from Invercargill to Gore and having it in our own district isn't that hard. And I think we should be advocating that we have got, obviously, a lot of wind coming online in the area, and having it somewhere around the Gore district, because we've got the cooling, we've got the land. It's not going to take up as good a land as what they got down there. It's something that we can easily host.
I'd argue we've probably got just as much good land. But yeah, point taken. I know they've bought the land there, but again, whether they can build on it and industrialise it, I guess, is a different question. And yes, absolutely, we'll be having those conversations as we did they were talking about big players like Amazon and Google, and we were saying would they be interested in setting up HQs in the beautiful town of Gore, being so close to Queenstown and things like that. And they said it would be a conversation we need to have with them, but who knows? There could definitely be some economic opportunities there down the line. Apparently those companies look for tax incentives, which we obviously can't give them because we don't do the tax takes locally. Councillor McKenzie.
Excuse my ignorance, through your worship, what sort of land area are they actually wanting? How much? 100 acres? All right. Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Minister Penny Simmons is coming to our upcoming Mayoral Forum, so if councillors do have anything that they would like me or Councillor Hovell to ask the Minister while we're there, please let us know and we can add that to the agenda. Any further conversation? Happy to move. Councillor Reid, seconded by Councillor Fraser. All those in favour, please say aye. And against? Carried. That brings us to the end of the agenda. Just before we take off... yes. Community Bulletin. You wanted to raise something?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to move a motion, actually, that we have the Manager's Bulletin included in all future agendas. It's actually something that while we get them privately as councillors, it's actually really good to have them as part of the agenda so they can be talked about and those discussions can be put in minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, through your worship. There was just a bit of a question amongst some of the staff about whether those bulletins should be coming through a council agenda or committee agendas, with the likes of the Wellbeing Committee, the Planning and Regulatory Committee. Some of these bulletins tend to be on all fours with those committees' businesses, so there was a bit of confusion around whether it should be the full council, and a lot of the bulletins are prepared on a 6 or 8 weekly basis, so we did wonder whether it would be better focused at committee level, not council, but open to direction.
I'm quite happy for it to be at those committees, as long as we're able to bring them up in council meetings as well, through the minutes of those meetings.
Absolutely, Councillor. I'm going to steal Councillor Dixon's thunder a bit here, I think, but it was discussed at the Chairs meeting last week. about that community bulletin coming to Councillor Dixon's committee, the Community Wellbeing Committee. So that's the way we'll do it. And then it will, as you said, will come through in the minutes and we can bring forward any items that are in there. Yeah.
Thank
Does that
you.
cover it, Councillor Dixon? Sorry for stealing your thunder.
Yeah. And I did have one other thing, if that's all right. I'd just actually simply like to acknowledge the fact that today is Steve's last public council meeting, and I'd like to acknowledge and thank him for his commitment and hard work for the past 22 years on behalf of the ratepayers of the district. And during my time on council, I've seen how the district has benefited from his work ethic, his forward thinking, and projects like MVM that have gotten off the ground with a lot of help from him. The shovel-ready projects that we've already talked about tonight that we've all benefited from, probably paying for too with our depreciation problems. But I know during COVID, it was a very interesting time for all of us, and the funding applications went to the CE's office, and along with a couple of the managers, I know you worked night and day to get those things pushed through, which enabled us to receive substantial funding that enabled us to have projects that we would never have been able to do on our own. And from memory, I recall that you worked 28 days without pause on those. So the last 18 months have also had some trying moments, but throughout that you've shown your professionalism and conducted yourself with great dignity. Your sage advice dispensed to councillors has been done with thoughtfulness, clarity and humour, and it will be greatly missed, along with your honesty, work ethic and integrity. So on a musical note, if you'll excuse me, I'll pinch a few of your sayings. It's been a long and winding road over those 22 years, with the odd stairway to heaven, but more than a few highways to hell. So needing you to cross many bridges over troubled waters with the occasional barracuda hiding underneath. But the flip side of that is here comes the sun. And actually I wish you and Wendy all the very best for whatever the future brings for you. And once again, thank you for your service.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. And yeah, I was going to lead into that, but I think you've done it far more justice than I ever could have. I just want to thank you, Steve, also for stepping into the interim role. You have done a superb job at keeping the ship steady as we've gone through this process, and I concur with Councillor Reid. I wish you very best for your future endeavours.
And just by way of response, thank you for those unexpected comments, and both your worship, but particularly Councillor Reid. Love the musical analogies. It's one of the plans I do have when I depart, is to actually blow the dust off the drum kit and the guitar, which have been sitting sadly forlorn in a room and needs some personal love and attention. So yes, it's been a hell of a blast, a bit of a roller coaster ride, and you know, it's been particularly satisfying seeing some of the projects that we've got over the line, and some of those things, and I think a roller coaster ride and highs and lows are so apt, because while you have the highs, and tremendously proud of the likes of Mataura Valley Milk and getting that off up and running, you have other such, and the likes of this complex, which we now have in this town, pretty much, as I call it, three complexes. We have a sports complex, we have a civic precinct, should I say, an arts and heritage precinct, but then you have the lows of dealing with overhead premix being put into Southland warehouses without any of us consenting, and trying to dig out a solution for that. And these things often take 4 or 5 years. And then the tragedy of the forthcoming inquest into Lachlan Jones, which will remain with me, I think, for my remaining years, as being such a really devastating incident, with answers still being sought, but hopefully the forthcoming inquest will shed some light on that. But yeah, I certainly depart with pride and an expectation of optimism about what lies ahead, and to become more of a Joe Blow, rather than having my sort of face featured in the press and being blamed for everything that might be going wrong. So I look forward to just ducking out and doing something a wee bit different. But thank you for those heartfelt comments. I really do appreciate it. It means a lot.
Thank you for that, Steve. Do we need a break or do we want to carry on? You want a break? Okay, we will take a 5-minute break as we clear out. Thank you very much to the public for coming along. Remember, we will be out and about in not next week, but the week after. Yep, so please come and see us at our various locations. We would love to chat to you about everything council. Thank you very much.